In this presentation, we examine forms commonly used in the international sale of goods. We start with the first form known as the pro forma invoice. Now, this is a document that's going to be prepared by the seller. The seller prepares the pro forma invoice and uses it to offer goods to a foreign buyer. It's a formal document addressed to a specified buyer to sell the product according to certain terms and conditions. A pro forma invoice is in effect an estimated invoice that's going to be sent by the seller to the buyer in advance of a shipment or delivery of goods. It's going to note the kind and quantity of the goods, their value, as well as any other important information such as weight and transportation charges. Pro forma invoices are commonly used as preliminary invoices with a quotation, or sometimes for custom purposes in importation. They differ from a normal invoice in not being a demand or request for payment. Here's an example of a pro forma invoice. And as you can tell, there's a number of items included on here, including the name of the seller, the buyer, a description of the goods, issues related to packing and shipping costs, as well as a place for the signature and status of the authorized person making the offer. The second form we're going to look at is the purchase order. And if you've worked in retail, you are probably familiar with the purpose of a purchase order. It's a document that's going to be prepared by the buyer. The purchase order, sometimes we call it a PO, is a commercial document issued by the buyer to the seller, again indicating types, quantities, and agreed prices for products or services which the seller will provide to the buyer. Many times it can constitute a new offer. In fact, the purchase order can be explicit in denoting that it is an offer, and therefore the pro forma invoice, the offer contained in the pro forma invoice, is discarded, rejected. This is a counter offer. In this example, which I've got here, we can see the international purchase order. I've got this lengthy document online. It starts with a long definitional section, and then of course the thing that I want to point out is that the order is the buyer's offer to the seller. The seller agrees that the acceptance is going to be limited to the terms of the order, and that no additional or different term shall be binding. In essence, this is an attempt to head off the battle of the forms that we discussed in the lecture. The third document is the order confirmation, and this is a document prepared by the seller. And this document will contain acknowledgement of the sale, but it also may contain terms or conditions in conjunction with the order. These terms and conditions may differ from the original purchase order, once again leading to the battle of the forms. And remember, the battle of the forms occurs where we have an assent that includes additional or changed terms. The fact is that when we use pre-printed forms and pre-written templates, there can be confusion as to which terms actually make up the contract. And so when we discuss the battle of the forms, we'll have to look at those rules that we talked about in terms of, is there a material alteration in the terms and contract of the contract. Remember, material terms relate to price, payment, quantity, quality, delivery, and dispute settlement. So, in conclusion, we know that buyers and sellers often exchange forms. And the three forms that I want you to know for the class are the pro forma invoice, the purchase order, and the order confirmation. And be aware that differences in terms and conditions can lead to what we call the battle of the forms. Thanks for listening, and if you have any questions, please let me know.